Hi, welcome everyone to this episode of The Disordinati. I'm so happy today because I'm with one of my closest friends here in Oxford, Maya Huth. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, my love.
So Maya is a psychotherapist and she specializes in behavioral change, which is incredible. I myself do behavioral economics, so I think it's a very good match. You're based in Oxford, but you work also online. And today we're going to explore a bit this world of, psychotherapy and also how you deal with an issue that obviously has come up in your life, which is chronic fatigue. And we're going to see how they two, let's say, intertwine. Let's start from your journey. So maybe you can introduce yourself and also explain us how you decided to become a psychotherapist. What led you to it?
Yeah, so like I say, thank you for having me. I Goodness me, yeah, what led me to psychotherapy? So my name's Maya, as you've said. I'm a CBT therapist, cognitive behavioral therapist. I bring in other aspects of psychotherapy within my work, sort of specializing in compassion focused therapy, mindfulness based therapy as well. I bring in some somatic work, so really looking at how the body reacts to things. And these are parts that we sort of intertwine within the journey of CBT. In terms of how I sort of fell into the work that I do now, I started my undergraduate degree based in Oxford, and then I kind of ended up down this path. Joining the Warnford Psychiatric Hospital from a very, very early on young age, working within eating disorders. So then I ended up staying there for quite a long time, specializing in eating disorders. And at that time, I didn't even know what a psychotherapist was. I think everybody throws around these terms, right? Psychologist, psychotherapist, psychiatrist. When you come out of an undergrad, you don't really know what's what. You've done an undergrad in psychology and you're not really sure what that means or where to go with it. But the beauty about working within ED is the biopsychosocial connection. So
Mm.
these women and some men who were in the psychiatric unit really suffered with eating disorders, but within that, you really learn about how the body suffers and
Mm.
how the mind suffers, and how these two things are intertwined. And then we look at the models that we can implement in order to get these individuals out of these vicious cycles, whether they've had them for years, whether they're quite new to them. There tends to be a critical incident within their life that has spiked this pattern of behavior.
Yeah. It,
Um,
it's so
go
interesting when you mention, the body and how it's connected, obviously, to the mind. And it's something that we sometimes take for granted. When we go to see a therapist, we think it's only in our head. But so often it's connected to how we feel. And so often the body tells us also that something is not right. And I was wondering, because you've had these incredible experiences, some also sort of extreme, I would say, because you also worked in prisons. You
Yes,
also
yeah.
worked in NHS and with very traumatic experiences that people had dealt with. So I was wondering what did working in prisons and, teach you about trauma and human behavior.
Yeah, goodness me. Yeah, so I worked in prison whilst I was doing my undergrad. Um, and in terms of kind of what I guess what it taught me about human behavior, it's really based on which prisoners we were working with at the time. But there were some inmates that had been in prison for a very, very long time. They'd been in segregation due to their behaviors. They couldn't be within the general population. They'd then come out of seg and they'd come and work with me for offender rehabilitation. And their short-term memory was just not present because they're not socializing with others. They're spending a lot of time isolated on their own. So your brain is a muscle, and it's literally not practicing that feedback loop. So putting the trauma to one side for a second, just looking at how prison itself can really change an individual's way of being, their way of acting and reacting to things. Sometimes it's fantastic to get somebody back on, I guess, the straight and narrow, we could say. We work on rehabilitation. We then, are able to slowly titrate people back into everyday life and society. But with others, it was really interesting to see if they've been segregated for so long, what that does to the brain and the memory, and equally just their social interaction with other inmates when they were out of segregation. In terms of the trauma side of what you're asking, it's really interesting to see how trauma does affect our behavior, and it can be small t trauma or big T trauma. So small t, do you understand this concept of
No, maybe
small
you
t?
can explain it. I'm sure that people will
Yeah.
love to know more.
So this idea of small t trauma is little things that happen within your life, from having anxious attachment when you're young. Maybe mum left you in a playgroup you weren't comfortable in.
Mm,
Maybe you then went to school and you didn't feel like you quite fit in correctly.
mm,
Maybe you're always told that you could do better, and it
mm.
slowly starts to build up a picture within your head of, I'm not good enough, I can't quite achieve like others. Maybe you strive to get into the A team in hockey, but you go whatever sport, other sports are available, but only manage to get into the B team or whatever it was. This starts to develop little t, small t trauma over time, where you start to build up a picture of yourself.
Wow.
And then from that, you kind of have these straws that build upon the camel's back, and then maybe something extra happens. And it can be just as small. Maybe you go through a slightly difficult breakup, or somebody says something to you at work that doesn't quite fit right. And then that breaks down that self esteem. And from that broken down self esteem, maybe you have a certain individual that acts out or has an impulse behavior. And this antisocial behavior can lead to a crime.
Wow.
So that may be a background. Or you've got big T trauma. Maybe someone was raised in a really abusive household and has mixed with people from a lower socioeconomic class that didn't have the same opportunities as others. And maybe this causes a significant life event.
Mm.
Maybe they went through a difficult event of assault when they were young.
Mhm, mhm.
Having been around that, that develops certain schemas, certain ways of thinking, create certain stories within your brain
Yeah.
and patterns of behavior to which you model, which causes you to then start to have that same behavior. So trauma is a very interesting one, because you can experience a significant trauma background teaching you behaviors to be antisocial and therefore act out in certain ways, creating offensive behavior.
And it's so interesting that there are these small, tiny traumas and then these bigger ones. And I guess that,
Mm.
growing up, we all try to be someone also based on things that have happened to us or things that we were thought we should be. And I guess, yeah, I always think we could be so many things, and so many versions of ourselves. And then we do end up being one version of ourselves that might not be what we were destined to do, but it's extremely interesting. Now these obviously were very heavy and complex topics and themes, and we've mentioned at the beginning that you also are dealing with chronic fatigue,
Yeah.
and so this is something that is affecting you directly, and I was wondering if you can tell us a bit, when you first realized that this fatigue was more than just ordinary tiredness.
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's really hard, actually. It's really hard to think about this idea of, when did I know?
Mhm.
I think a lot of us look back at patterns behaviors, right? And we think, well, if only I knew then, or hindsight's a beautiful thing. But I guess we talk a lot in the field about unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. And it started out with burnout. I had quite severe burnout from working for the NHS, and due to other life events. And then I had an accident which caused concussion. And we kind of thought, okay, well, the brain's slowing down a little bit. I maybe wasn't getting my words out so well. I wasn't walking properly. And that felt quite traumatic. I'm quite an active individual, so as you know, so not being able to do certain things was quite hard. But as time went on, I was noticing that I was at work and I was completely knackered by kind of 2 o'clock. And at first, sort of labeled it as knackered, this idea of like, I'm really tired. I don't quite get what's going on. But I was training for a high rocks, and I was training myself at 6 o'clock in the morning before work. So I was still trying to function. And then it sort of got to the point where my brain just wasn't working.
Mm.
I couldn't. I couldn't put sentences together. I couldn't eat properly because the muscles in my jaw were so tired. I was sleeping, but I was tired and wired, yet I wasn't waking up feeling revived.
Mm,
I kept feeling like I'd been hit by a bus. But more than that, I had really bad brain fog, and I'd never experienced that before.
mhm,
Uh, my kind of light sensitivity was bad, so it was hard to know what is post concussion. So I went back to the doctors, and they said, "Well, it's post concussion syndrome. You've got nothing to worry about. It'll go."
yeah.
And it just wasn't going. And my body wasn't feeling like mine. And sometimes we have this intuition of things just don't
Mhm,
feel right. But everyone kept saying, well, go back to the GP, get more blood tests. It's like I've had every blood test under the sun.
mhm,
Um, Nothing's showing up. Like I'm just going through a phase of tiredness, like it will pass.
yeah.
And I remember walking out of work at 2 o'clock one afternoon, and I just thought to myself, this is ridiculous. Like I can't keep going like this. I can't function. And I was incredibly emotional all the time.
Mm,
Um, and I think, like a child, if we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs or just a child's needs in general, it's
yeah.
like eat me, eat me, try that again, feed me,
Yeah.
let me sleep and bathe me, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, and if the child needs something, the child cries. And I just thought, I'm crying all the time.
Yeah.
I tried to blame it on hormones, as I think a lot of women do, and then just thought, you know what, if I was a man, would I be blaming this on hormones?
Mhm,
And I was just exhausted. So I kind of had the Christmas break, went back to work in January, and I think I was a week in, and it all came back again, and I just thought, okay, this like
mhm.
that cannot continue this year
Yeah.
like this. And so that's when I knew something's not right. But the fact that it took me from November 2024 to January 2026 to, I guess part of me wants to say to admit or
Yeah.
commit defeat, but I think I just sort of thought I could bulldoze through it. And I'm not a napper, and that was a whole thing in itself with
Yeah.
trying to develop my relationship with rest. But that's when I got the diagnosis of ME, or MECFS as it's also known, chronic fatigue syndrome. Um, and it's been a real challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially knowing how into sports you are. It must have come as a sort of surprise and a new
Mm,
lifestyle to be
mm,
learned.
mm,
And when you were saying that you were emotional, I was thinking, I think everyone, when they don't sleep, even for one night, I mean,
mm.
personally, if I don't sleep well one night and I don't feel rested, I will be emotional. So sleep and like feeling rested is so important for how we function.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how, experiencing this and knowing that you had to live with fatigue, how did this change the way you work and also how you understand your own clients?
Yeah, so we look at kind of a disorder specific model within cognitive behavioral therapy, and we also look at a transdiagnostic model. And I think it depends on the individual, but I also, I live with ADHD as well, which is it's quite a funny oxymoron, so to say, because you've got chronic fatigue, which is, really pining for nervous system rest. And then you've got ADHD, which is pining for dopamine. So we've kind of got the dopamine go, go, go. And then we've got the chronic fatigue, which is trying to have the nervous system settle. And, on top of that, my father's side is German and my mother's side is Jewish. So I've got all
Yeah,
of the
you've got a big mix.
um, but looking at that, we want to work transdiagnostically with things like this. So I always sort of like to say to my clients is that I'm a psychotherapist with lived experience.
Yeah.
I've got chronic fatigue syndrome, I've got ADHD, and I'm the expert in CBT, but you're the expert in yourself. So we look at this fusion. Everybody is multifaceted. Everybody has so many layers, and
Mm,
sometimes individuals aren't seen as the holistic whole they are. So I allow, with individuals suffering with long-term health conditions, I allow for a lot of push-pull within that. What does the client need at the time? What are you bringing to the session? How are you feeling today? Are you feeling tired? And so cognitively, we need a shorter session.
mm, mm,
For someone else, maybe their ADHD's, on fire today for whatever reason. They haven't been able to settle. And so, again, do we need short, sharp bursts? Do we need a few more breaks? Do we need to do standing therapy? Do we need to kind of
yeah.
stim and move around while we converse? Do we have something we can fiddle with and play with? Some of my clients come in with fit or without fidget toys. I have somewhere my box of
Mm,
goodies.
Yeah.
of fidget toys and things that just allow people to be a little bit more present.
Yeah.
Um, and then depending on the long-term health condition will depend on how we're going to alter that.
Yeah.
So I think the fatigue has really opened up not only, oh, I have chronic fatigue, but what are all the other symptoms that come with that? You
Mhm.
have severe muscle ache, you have a lot of pain, you have, like I say, a lot of brain fog. So
Mhm.
do you need to not miss session because you're fatigued?
Mhm.
Which, yes, it's an option. Sometimes we really are tired, but can we adapt? Because a lot of what's happening both within things like ADHD and chronic fatigue needs an emotional release. So
Mm.
the more the body holds on to the emotion, sometimes the more vicious the cycle, the more tired the body gets. When the body's tired, the cognition's tired.
Of
So
course.
how can we give you an emotional release within that? Do we need to do that at the start of session
Mm.
before we get into what we wanted to bring today? So
Mm.
really answering your question, what's this done for myself and my clients? It's allowed for more flexibility, more understanding and knowing. It's allowing me to work transdiagnostically.
Mm.
Um, and I guess help clients with that level of acceptance that comes with trying to be who you were, but without forgetting that and without, I guess, going down a path of complete change.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. And I guess it gives you also so much more empathy. Obviously, all psychotherapists, should be empathic towards the clients, but
Mm.
having experienced that probably gives you even more of that because you know what people go through. And this sounds amazing what you're able to do with this flexibility and adaptation. And um, hearing you talk about chronic fatigue, I don't know, have you ever experienced some prejudices? I mean, what do people misunderstand most about living with chronic fatigue? Do they tell you, no, come on, just have a nap, it will all be fine tomorrow, things like that? Have you experienced this kind of behavior towards you?
Yeah, I guess the difficult thing when it comes to chronic fatigue is that it's not tiredness,
Mhm.
right? I think this is why it's called ME, but none of us can pronounce what that means, what it stands for. So I'm not even going to bother trying. But I get a lot of, oh, haven't we all got that? Aren't we just all tired? And you're like, yeah, I kind of
Not,
wish,
yeah.
I wish that was it. But yeah, I guess you get, like I say, you get a lot of that. You get a lot of, oh, but you look well,
Mm-hmm.
and that people mean well, and I know they mean well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we have a lot of leniences for it, but I think in a way it can feel quite devaluing.
Mm-hmm.
And that can hit quite hard. So I think the most common misconception is that it's not tiredness, and it comes with not severe lethargy, not being able to do a lot, having to choose between washing your hair that day or eating.
Yeah.
That the fatigue comes with decision paralysis of what to do. And the more you try and make a decision, the more tired you get. And then the other symptoms, the pain, the brain fog, the nausea, the waking up at 5 minutes later, having to go back to bed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's the way in which it debilitates your everyday is, in my not very humble opinion, the most misconceptions I think that people experience. But I'm new to chronic fatigue in the way in which a lot of people aren't. I guess it probably really developed for me post concussion. So maybe August last year, end of July. Yeah, end of July 2025 was when it really kicked in. And prior to that, it was just burnout and concussion.
Yeah.
So August it kicked in 2025. I got my diagnosis in Jan. So really, I'm, let's say, 6 months in.
Yeah,
You
you're
know,
still navigating what it means to have it and how to.
and therefore what those prejudices, I can't say that word today, look like.
As a therapist, obviously, you're used to helping others.
Mm.
Was it difficult for you to accept that you were the one needing support and help?
I mean, of course, as a psychotherapist, I have psychotherapy. It's it's part of what we do. It's hard to sometimes find a therapist that hasn't had therapy. I do believe that all
Yeah.
therapists should be doing therapy. But in the end, if you go down a generic NHS pathway and they diagnose you with chronic fatigue, they go, okay, so we're going to take you to chronic fatigue clinic, which, by the way, I'm still on the wait list for.
Mhm.
Um, and we're going to send you to a long-term conditions CBT therapist for chronic fatigue.
Mm.
I am the long-term conditions CBT therapist for chronic fatigue. So
Oh
I was
my
like,
God,
okay, this is really wonderful.
that's
How
a paradox. That's amazing.
um, so yes, I think it's been hard because not just because I'm a therapist, but because of my archetype as a person.
Yeah.
I'm a fix it person. I'm a there's a problem, that's okay. How can we fix it? And you can't fix
Mhm.
this. It's patience, it's nervous system regulation work, it's trauma work, it's looking at what are those small T and big T traumas that have kept your body stuck in fight flight.
Yeah.
It's something that's happened from a long, long time ago. And then the straw that breaks the camel's back for me was the concussion, was the adrenaline surge in the body that's then held in the body and got nowhere to go and release. So
Mm.
this is personal work I'm doing. But when you have really bad days, which actually I'm coming out of an incredibly bad month, um, so when you have those times, part of you does go down that path of what am I doing wrong? Like this is my job. I'm helping others. Why can't I help myself? And you realize that recovery is not linear. So it's not anything you're doing wrong. It's simply the journey. It's the journey of I look at it as levels. I explain to my clients as levels. So you're on level one. You've worked through level one, you're on level 1.10. We're
Mhm.
going to go level two, level 2.1, which can feel like level 1.1 again because
Mm.
we've got all these levels to move up. But slowly your body is learning, your muscle memory is learning, your brain and your symptoms are releasing. But every time you move up a level, it feels like exacerbation. It feels
Mm.
harder because it is harder. It's harder on the next level, the next step up in a job, the next weights that you lift in the gym. It feels as hard as weight one because your body's used to that. And I think your question of have you found it hard to accept help? My rational reasoning, right? My emotional brain is really strong, and my rational brain is finding it hard sometimes
Mm.
to speak up, to kind of take the wool from my eyes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's bruising my ego a little bit at times, and maybe this is the journey. It's here to humble me in a way that I didn't know I needed, but it's hard. You definitely have that imposter syndrome come in for sure.
It's interesting how sometimes it's easier to be kind to others than to be kind to ourselves. Um, and when you were talking about the steps, I was thinking, yes, all of them are necessary because, for instance, I don't do a lot of sports. I mean, I do very delicate forms of exercise, and I decided out of nowhere to do some weightlifting, and I started like at 2 kilos, which is crazy for like my body type. And I did like 60 of these movements. And as a result of this, now my arm is completely swollen and I cannot move it. So it really shows you that you need to gradually advance and be patient. And sometimes it's really hard. What does help you? When you have these very difficult days, what is it that has helped you cope?
Okay. Um, some days I don't know. Some days some days I'm pining for the answer, but I think a big lesson I've learned is because, as I said, I'm this kind of archetype, this fixer. It's like, what can I add in? What can I
Mm.
add in to help me? And then I have to go, what would I say to a client? And I would say to a client, what do we need to take away? Because we
Mm.
can, we can add and we can add, and we find within psychotherapy, you've got but impulses and urges is what they call it in counseling, and it's completely lost my brain. What am I trying to say? Um, we have it's like impulses and urges, approach and avoidance. Literally did it with a client this morning actually. So the more we approach something, maybe we need to avoid it more. Are we asking for reassurance all the time? Am I okay? Am I okay? Am I okay? Are we walking down the street thinking, is that dog going to bite me? Is that dog going to bite me? Slow
Mm.
down. Let's come back a little bit.
Mm.
Stop approaching the thought or stop approaching the issue. And therefore, do we need to avoid it a little bit more? So when, and vice versa, are we avoiding something all the time? I have chronic fatigue and therefore I can't go to the gym. I
Yeah.
have chronic fatigue and therefore I need to just stay in bed all the time. Okay, how can we adjust this?
Yeah.
So for me, sometimes it's a matter of I might be approaching something too hard in the mindset of how do I fix this today? What do I implement and put in? And maybe it's just a matter of slow down, nervous system regulation work. So that's really, it's called something called somatics. So it's
Mhm.
really, really slow, simple movements to allow the brain to register where
Mm.
the body's safe in space. So it's doing a little bit more slower activity can be really helpful, as well as learning. I've learned a lot around restorative rest. So
Mm.
what's restful for me? TV has never been restful for me. Sitting down has never really been restful for me. So it's who do I need to surround myself with, which has made me really understand which friends of mine are restorative
Yeah.
and what do I need to do that is restorative for me, which is normally what is really low stim. So do I need to nap? I was never a napper. If I was in Spain, siesta, no
No.
problem.
Yeah.
Not big, well, I say no, not a big deal because it's like it's sunny and we're all
Yeah.
eating for like hours and hours the time because we've been sat down for the last 5 hours and let's keep going. But in England, we don't do this. We don't siesta. So the idea of having a nap felt like I was being lazy.
Mm. Yeah.
And I really had to train myself out of that. I come from quite a go, go, go family background as well. So the idea of sitting and napping was just wasn't a thing. You're wasting time. You're
Yeah.
doing nothing. And so the art of doing nothing, it's actually a book by the Dalai Lama, but the art of doing nothing became so taboo.
Yeah.
So I've done a lot of rewiring on my relationship with rest.
Il dolce far niente, no? How we say it in Italian. I
Honestly,
think
but I can't
everyone.
the art of
think,
doing that.
yeah, I think people in the UK should learn a bit more, from the Italians just to take it easy and don't judge yourself when you're not doing anything.
Well, it's an interesting one, right? Because the more we're not doing, the
Yeah.
more we're being.
Yeah.
And in this culture, we find that we go, 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 go. But what have you actually observed? What have you actually taken on? Where's the mindfulness within this? Where's the connection within this?
Mm.
And so I'm such a doer that I forget to be, and I forget to be in space.
Mhm.
And so I'm spending so much more time appreciating the being. And it's very, very hard when it's not with a glass of wine in hand because it promotes brain fog. But yeah, I'm maybe getting better at that. And I think sometimes not only rewiring, but reframing the illness of it's allowing me to be more present on some days. It's also incredibly hard when symptoms are bad. You can't be present because
Of course.
your brain's not working. You've literally got
Yeah.
fog over you. But yeah, there's a lot to say about being and not doing.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. You've said it a bit before, but so what do you do today, and what kind of therapy can patients expect from you?
Yeah, okay. So I work privately, both online and face to face. Um and we've talked a lot about this idea of this fusion. I'm a behavior change therapist, so I work on that behavior change of those cycles. What's
Mhm.
getting you into the cycles you're in? What are your maladaptive behaviors, and how can we look to really loosen that and change, not only from looking at the past and the present, but for the future? What are your goals? What behaviors have you got that you want to adapt and change? I specialize in anxiety and depression disorders, but I really have a strong love for OCD.
Mhm.
It's one of the anxiety disorders I take a lot of. I mean, don't get me wrong, I thoroughly enjoy working with all the disorders, but there's just something about OCD that I find as a therapist incredibly rewarding.
Mhm.
Um, but alongside now long-term health conditions and looking really comorbidly. So what else do you have going on? Are you suffering with ADHD? Are you suffering with autism? What else are you living with? And then really being able to allow clients to see that they aren't labels.
Mm.
So many people are very quick to put labels on things. and we're living with these things. So how can we flow with them, adjust them, and for a lot of time, how can we recover from them? But knowledge is healing. So can we learn our patterns to
Mm.
then be able to unpick them? So I think my one to the therapist is to provide that space and allow you to be seen in every layer that you are, not just as this label or this disorder or whatever it is you feel you're bringing. Bring what's hurting you, and let's have a look at why it's so important for us to adjust it.
Yeah. That's amazing, and it connects so well also to the podcast because it's called Disordinati, right? And the idea that you just explained it, that we're not just we're not just one thing, we're not just one label, we're a multitude of things, and they all should be able to come out and be cherished in a way. Thank you so much. It was a lovely chat, and I've learned so much from your work, and thank you for sharing also who you are.
Of course, thank you for having me.